Hey, folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name is Matt, and this is Crypto Heartbeat. Folks, it's that time again. It's 11 o'clock Central Texas time, and it is Freedom Friday and Stephen Friday today. It is good to see you again. What an amazing past 10 days I've had. We finished up and had a meetup in Houston, and then we had Gen Con 2023, and it blew my mind. It exceeded my expectations. When you're planning an event, it's you just don't know how it's going to turn out, right? There's a lot of variables, but it was amazing because the right people were there, and it was just it was a special time of getting people together. And you know what I realized during that time? I realized that the currency in the community is trust, right? Without trust, it's very, very difficult to accomplish anything. And you don't realize how powerful trust is because it's only built in relationships, right? You think you can trust someone and you have to have evidence for it and all that. But what's really amazing to me is that what makes this new financial world and new financial systems so amazing is the concept of trustlessness. And it's weird that it's this combination of trust and trustlessness, meaning the system itself, there's order to it. And what we're going to be talking about today is related to the fact that this whole creation that we find ourselves in the midst of, right? This simulation that we are in is ordered. It has order to it, right? A God of order. And what I've experienced and seen is that those who have co opted the system, right? And you think about the money, right? We talk about crypto all the time. This idea that there's this new financial system and there's something called DeFi, and Bitcoin kind of started this with something that was censorship resistant, no counterparty risk, right? Something that was going to be immutable, that was just going to be there as long as the internet was there, it was going to be there. And what I love about that is it takes the control out of centralized parties' hands. And that's what's so unique about value. Ultimately, value isn't what something is backed by. It's actually a story that you tell yourself about what it is. So a means of exchange, like you think about just paper money, it's an agreement. But if you go way, way, way back, let's say the mining towns of the 1850s, people needed things and they shared things. It's it's a really incredible concept when you think about it, that the trust has been removed from the centralized players through DeFi crypto. That is a big idea. So right now, currently in the financial system, the Federal Reserve has the ability to change the rules without your permission, right? They can change a database record and print 5 trillion more dollars. Now they have some permission when it comes to Congress and those type of things about what they can do. But of course, they've got a group of people that are going along with them. Look what's happened right now. This latest agreement is basically for the next 2 years, they can print as much as they want. And so when you are at the mercy of centralized parties and what they think is best, what ends up happening is you lose trust in it. You lose trust in that system. And so along comes Bitcoin, Along comes DeFi crypto, along comes Hex, along comes Texan, along comes Ophir, or whatever it is, immutable contracts on the blockchain. And when you think about the principles of trustless yield, where it's just you and the contract and it's your choice, it emphasizes some of the most amazing principles of the order of creation, meaning you have the choice. The choice is in your hands. You have to take personal responsibility for it. And we talk a lot about that concept here. You know what? God's not going to take away your free will. You have the ability to choose. And the question is, choose wisely. But what's so amazing about this is in a trustless system, the currency still is trust of individuals because we're on an even footing with one another. And I see this as a metaphor for our faith in God. It's your own personal responsibility and you have a choice. And that's what I love about it. It's the purity of this fully decentralized system of the one that created it all gives you the opportunity to choose them or not. And what's really amazing, though, just like in crypto, there is incentive built into the system. Well, why? I think about Hex, for example, or I think about crypto in general. Like knowing about Hex, knowing about the T-share rate and all that stuff is one thing. Holding Hex and having T-shares and staking is a totally different thing. And the same thing is true with Jesus, right? The same thing is true with ultimately the spiritual realm. Is you have the choice to go your own way, or you can say, no, you know what? I'm not going to go my own way. I'm going to seek to go your way because you are out front. You are a shepherd. You speak and you're alive. And to me, as I've gone through this with Steve Staggs, right? This is our 13th episode. As I've gone through this with Steve Staggs, what I've come to realize is almost like a secret. Like I've been cut in on the deal. It feels like, hold on, this isn't complicated, although it is complex. It's, structured and ordered, but it also is extremely simple. And so I had this, Steve's going to be coming in here in a little bit. And we're going to talk about an experience that I had that illustrated this amazingly well. But I've had really a breakthrough in the last 10 days, an aha moment, if you will, to say, hold on, wow, this is really simple, but it also has implications that are tremendous. And of course, if you think about that, who doesn't want to know that truth? We've talked in many of these episodes about good news. What is good news? Well, if it's not good news for everyone, it's not good news. If it's not good news for everyone, it's not good news. Okay, well, what is this news? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about what does it look like if you actually considered the creator of the universe in your plans. And what I mean by that is his plans, right? Delight in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Well, what are the desires of my heart? And what I've realized, it's not what I want, it's what he wants. He will give me the desires of my heart, not what I desire. He'll rewrite my desires. And you think about what does it mean to be in alignment and ordering your life to the very framework of creation? Well, what is the framework of creation that we see that we know is not right with the order of things in the world? Is that those things are scarce, but the creation and all of its fundamentals are abundant. Hold on a second. I want to order my life in the way that it was designed. And so what's amazing about Steve Staggs and what's amazing about his counsel and his encouragement to me is he's always said to me, don't trust me, ask him yourself. And in that lies probably the most significant spiritual aha moment I've ever had. And that is, I'll go to church and I'll hear a story about a historical Jesus. I'll read the Bible, right? Or I'll read something that's prophetic or something about, the future as it relates to Revelation. And what's amazing to me is those things are great. But we're going to ask Steve today, and we're going to dive deep into a topic that we talked about one or two sessions ago. And we're going to really talk about the present what is happening right now? Because I had a huge aha. And the cool thing about telling Steve is one, he kind of giggles, he's kind of like, dude, it's so awesome. And he gets excited about it. Um, but it also, he gives more perspective because, Steve's been journeying like this for a long time. And it's so cool to have someone that's willing to talk to you about, hey, this is what I'm observing. What do you think about this? And it really is ultimately this concept of iron sharpening iron that we would engage in community and share these things and recognize the fact that this isn't some God who wants to squash us, but one who wants to guide and direct us. And so it's weird. It's really weird. It's like you let go and you receive this amazing peace and fruit from these revelations. So, with that, let's bring in the man himself for Stephen Friday. Ladies and gentlemen, he's back again for episode number 13. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I couldn't be better. I couldn't be better. I just had, I'm just on fire today. Just really, when, you're not distracted by things and you're like really contemplating, wow, what are the implications of all this? That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, very cool.
How are you doing? I know we had a little delay today. You doing okay? You ready to roll?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Yeah, we had life going on a little bit this morning, so we dealt with life and on we go. So here we are.
Well, fantastic. I appreciate your discipline and patience. We got Taryn here. Here we go, folks. Another Right Side Up. Have a blessed day, everyone. Taryn, thanks for being here. Michael Austell, God's man here waiting. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And you know what? You talk about that a lot, Steve, of just being interested, right? An attitude of interest. I'm just interested.
Yeah. Yeah. It's everything. It's where it starts.
Yeah. You're just like, hey, I'm open to it. Cadium. It was so great to meet Cadium. You know what I loved about him? He came in, he drove in, and to see you two talk about your Southern California days was so awesome.
So much crossover. It was a blast for sure.
Yeah, it's so cool to get a chance to meet these folks in person. You see them in the chat. So Cadium, welcome. It was so cool to see you there, and thanks for all your support. And we're live. David Lee, of course, David Lee, all the way from Southwestern Indiana. He's back again for episode 13. Thanks, David Lee. Much love to you, my friend. Academaciated is back as well. Afternoon all from the latest weather warfare region of the Great Lakes. I saw some guy who had, it was a formaldehyde reader. And I guess when things burn, there's a lot of particulates of formaldehyde, and it can be really dangerous to be breathing smoke from these fires. And of course, there's all kinds of conspiracies about how they're doing it intentionally. I think if you really want to cripple the United States, take out the Midwest sensible people.
That's right.
That's right. The hardworking folks, right?
Yeah. The guys who are actually paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Look who's here.
Just making a bunch of noise.
Kinetics is in the house. My guys, great to see you. It was so awesome because I got a chance to meet Kinetics in person. What a wonderful person.
Yeah.
And just amazing to have, we're building a community of folks who are like-minded and I think have an attitude and an openness to say, I don't know it all. And Steve, there's something about that idea of just going, I kind of got to the end of myself and I'm like, man, I thought I was smart. And then I realized, and it's like, it's kind of a letting go of like your intellect and your capabilities. And it's almost like, well, let me ask you this. When he says, kind of, I'm strong in your weakness, or when you're weak, I'm strong. That really seems to be true.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's, the way that we've been taught about it so often is that, that Paul is saying, yay, let me be weak, let me be weak, let me be weak. And we're forgetting about what he's saying is, hey man, well, you're weak, I'm strong. So let's do this together. The whole concept is together.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, you're so weak, you need me to bolster you up. That's not the point.
Yeah.
It's that we were not designed to do this by ourselves. There is no provision in the kingdom of God for individual effort.
Yeah.
It just does not exist.
And that's so cool. Well, you know how it is, yeah, you've got grandkids and, I've got kids and, when and you've probably seen this, maybe the kids have a school event or something, and maybe they're singing or performing in some way, and how their eyes light up when they see you in the crowd,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's something about that kind of moment where you go, that's how I feel about God. It's like when you say those things, I'm like, he's just like grandpa coming. And you see him there and you're like, "Oh, okay, you're with me. I
Yeah.
can do this."
Yeah.
Right? And there's
Yeah.
something about that, like, that is so powerful because you're like, "Wow, I'm not alone." And
Yeah.
so many of us have been told, I think that's a big, big lie that's been told to us that you're just alone in this world.
Yeah.
There's no one and of course, it's helpful to have friends and spouses and all that kind of stuff, but, I think that's one of the things the greatest attack of the deceiver is to say, "Yeah, you're alone.
Yeah.
There's nothing more to this." And I'm definitely I'm really thankful because it does make you feel and eliminates fear in your life. And that's one of the big stories I want to tell you and I want your thoughts on because you and I've talked a little bit about this ahead of time. But I'm so excited, Steve, because it's been happening in practice for me. And I know you're really thankful for that as well. Gunnerboat 37, what's going on? And the only one. Encrypt Heartbeat. I trust Gen Con 2023 went well for you. All is well at home on the front. That's great. And I know that the only one was taking care of a good friend of his that had surgery and couldn't be there, but he would have loved to be there. I would have loved for you to meet the only one.
Yeah.
One of my favorite guys in the community, Susie Q. Hey, wonderful Matt, Steve, family. Susie Q has the best attitude of them all. She is
You
always so positive and amazing. All right, so let's jump into this, Steve. I had an experience that was it basically took all of this stuff that I've been, talking with you about and made it very, very real.
Hmm.
And so my buddy Ray, who we talked all the time, we were driving back from Gen Con. And he said, "Hey, I want you to hear this sermon from my pastor about the love of the Father." And so it was a Father's Day message, and we were driving back, and we had 4 hours on our hands. So he said, "Hey, let's listen to this." I'm like, "Sure, I'm great with that." And so we started listening to this, and this guy was super gifted, right? Super like a great communicator, funny, articulate, winsome, right? And I was listening to all this, and what you had said this last time that I want to dig into is this idea of past, present, and future. That he was, he is, and he will be. And you'll share it the way that you share it. But what happened to me in listening to that sermon for an hour or so on the drive back was the Lord said to me, "This is Christian entertainment."
Hmm.
And what was really interesting was it was in the context of the church that was there in California. And they were like he was making fun of him because all the people are like, "This is my seat. Don't sit in my seat." And he was like, "Look under the seat. Is your name on it? Like, get over yourselves." But you could tell there was this kind of sense of community and he was fun and people kind of clapping and saying, "Yay, God." But all of the content broke out in my mind in this way. There was all of this wonderful historical teaching of true things about who Jesus was, and it was entertaining as heck. Super great communication. And every time he would say things or read a scripture, I would say, "Yes, that's so great. Wow, Jesus is so good. Look what he did." Right. And he went through all of this stuff of this historical thing. And then he talked about the future in heaven, right? Talked about the future and how amazing it was. And, this promise that we have. But then when it came to the present, it was illustrated as extremely anemic because the only application in the present was to love one another, which is true, right? This idea that we should love one another, right? People said, love God, love others. What I've realized and what has really come to a big aha for me is all of the things that we've been talking about since I ever met you was about Jesus standing alone in the present time, right now, like literally this second.
Yes.
And what I realized was this, and this was the big aha, and I want you to just tell me everything you know about this. Um, Everything that's ever been written down as an account, every miracle, every story, every parable, every teaching, every dirty sandal, every upper room, every single thing that is accounted for in the Bible and in scripture happened.
Yeah.
It happened.
Yeah.
And we took note. And let's say, inspired by the Holy Spirit, to say, remember this agricultural story. Remember coming out of Egypt. Remember going across the Jordan. Remember a pillar of smoke and fire. Remember manna. Remember these things. But you can't remember them if they didn't happen.
Yeah.
And they happened in the moment. And obviously, they declared, wow, look at how great this is. But what I'm realizing is, and what you said before was, Satan's okay with, and the deceiver is okay with you talking about the past or the future, because it's of no consequence. It's actually, what are you doing with me in the present moment? And when
Yes.
I realized that, I realized, hold on a second, I don't need to criticize anyone for their Bible study, and I don't need to accuse anyone of talking about what might happen in the future of Revelation. But what I recognized was this Christian entertainment was not providing any application for the present other than, well, we just love people. And
No.
it made sense that if you start touching the active, living, speaking, powerful, standing alone Jesus in the moment, you got challenges.
You're now in the game. You have begun to enter the game. If can use a sports
Yeah.
metaphor, it's at that point you've moved from the stands to actually on the field of play, um, and that's not a philosophical. That's not a theological. That's not a a statement of so it that is what happens. Um, the Because the present is the only place we live. And there is absolutely no doubt of the wonders that the Bible speaks of, even with all of its strategic misplay. And maybe sometime we'll actually get into that a little bit. Um, but there's absolutely no doubt, man. There is some really cool stuff going on there. Um, Same thing with what the future holds. Man, we could talk all about that. I mean, we have our futurists, we have our own flavor of what it's going to look like in the future. And man, that can be pretty daggone cool to talk about. Pretty exhilarating. But what happened in the past, that's an historical event. And it may be useful to create a context of thinking, uh, but that's about it. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the scriptures are referred to as useful. Um, what's really fascinating is in that same context, we are often told to submit ourselves to the authority of the Bible. And yet the Bible itself doesn't require that of us.
Right.
I
Jesus
mean,
does.
it's not even in the remotest vocabulary of the
Yeah.
Bible. And yet somehow we have done that. Why? Because it's an historical document. Well, yes, Jesus speaks through the Bible. Well, no, he doesn't speak through the Bible. What he does is he speaks to you and then indicates for you that portion of the Bible that is useful to him to open up your understanding of some of the things he's talking about.
Yeah.
See, I mean, so you start thinking in those terms. Why are you doing that, Jesus? Well, because the only time I live in is in the present. You want to live there with me.
Yeah.
And some of your story, once you begin to see it, it is so obvious, it's almost comical how obvious it is. Not comical laughing at, but comical in the sense of, oh, this is so very simple. It's almost mind-blowing how simple this is.
Yeah.
See, you rob me of my present by getting me enamored in the past or in the future. And guess what? I'm totally in your control. 100% in your control. Why? Because my present has been lost.
Wow.
I'm going to tell you a little story about this that is so, I mean, to me, it was just eye opening. Um, a dear friend of mine asked me to come out and speak to a group of people that he was, had a long-standing relationship with. And if he said, "Hey, listen, man, I need, let's get together and talk about something." I mean, they dropped everything they were doing essentially, and got involved in whatever he was talking about. And he and I had been talking for about 6 months about a lot of this kind of stuff. And he said, "Hey, man, would you mind come out and talk to a few of my friends out here?" And I said, "Sure, that's fine." I said, "Well, how do you want to approach this?" He said, "I'd like it to just be conversational," which, of course, as you well know, I thoroughly enjoy. And so we get out there, and he has this gentleman who is a long-standing missionary talk, and the guy brought a really great point. He says, "Hey, folks, we've been doing this for a long time, and yet we are not having the kind of success that we would think we should have."
Hmm.
And he's talking about as a church and as the way we believe and the way we approach this whole thing. And there was a lot of "yeahs, that's right," and stuff, things of that nature, and everybody agreeing. And I mean, it was a great start to a great couple of days, quite frankly. And so my friend then says, "Well, okay, Steve, what do you think about that? And maybe that's a good starting point. What do you think? Is that something we can talk about?" I said, "Sure, that's great." I said, "What's interesting? If we're looking for something new to do, why don't we consider listening to Jesus in the present?
Hmm.
Why don't why don't we consider asking him to teach us how to hear his voice in the present and then deal with him in the present? Because after all, that entire book that you point to, that some consider as infallible, others consider it um, uh, um, in the context of how they call sola scriptura, it's the only thing. Some consider it infallible. All of these inerrant, all of these things that we talk about with it. Yet every single word that's in there is a result of God speaking to them
Yeah. That's exactly the point right there.
in the moment.
Yeah.
They
Every one
had,
of them.
they had nothing to write down if God did not speak to them in the moment, however it was that he did that.
Yep.
And so why don't we try that on?
That's it.
And it went, I mean, it was,
Yeah.
like a lead balloon. It just didn't go over because we're not taught to think in those terms, you
Yeah.
know. So, yes, very powerful, very profound. And yet it does require some commitment because it is a very different way of living than looking to a book or to a building or to, people who are supposedly, called of God to do certain things, which I'm not discounting at all. But the whole model of how we have been taught to relate to God is all in the manner that you just experienced. And it does. It just go once you see it, it's so obvious. It's like, whoa, dude,
Yeah.
that is so very simple and plain.
What's amazing is if I were to talk to a group of my friends who, let's say, they're not they're kind of casual Christians, right? That's how I kind of call them. They're it's not like they're just Easter and Christmas, but it's kind of cultural Christianity. It's kind of like this is like how things work here in Central Texas. And if I were to talk with them about it, it's almost like the concept of lukewarm, or a form of godliness but denying its power. It's convenient. Okay. And I want to say hello to a couple of people. I see Vira Finance CEO. Awesome. Glad you're here. And Matt Long. But look what he says about you. This is like the funniest things. Too much truth from Stagnum PI reported. That is the greatest comment of all time, Matt Long. I love that. I just had to say that. Um, but so here's the thing I think is so useful about these conversations. If I were to have a serious conversation with any one of my friends, people that I see at church, right? And we really were kind of digging in. I said, "How you doing? And what's going on with you?" And all this kind of stuff. I would say a lot of the people that I know that are in the church are saying it's useful for my kids. Yeah, and it's kind of the attitude. It's like I've got a buddy who's a surgeon, and he's a super smart guy and very very capable guy. And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, it makes me kind of stop, and it's good to do that. And the messages are helpful because sometimes it helps me as I relate to my wife or my kids, and it's a good reminder. But it's more like it's like going to class, kind of an education, kind of a reminder, helpful." Um, and then I look at another group of people who have rejected anything related to that because of either really the hypocrisy of parents or people that they know, and they're like, this is phony stuff. And I always felt that way when I was younger, is that these people are kind of playing a game. It's not, it doesn't have real power, and I'm not interested in this unless it's real power. And of course, my experience in September 10th of 2000 was like real power, physical experience. But now, as I journey these 23 years and have these kind of conversations, it's almost like it comes into focus and it's real sharp versus kind of being a dull kind of thing. Because when I listened to that sermon, and literally the words Christian entertainment was what I heard,
Yeah.
is that it felt good. And I think about a good movie, right? If I go to a good movie and it's, what a great story, and it's redemptive, and it makes you feel good. And you're like, that really made me feel good. That's how it felt to me. These people aren't lying. They're not saying, "Oh no," because when you talk about the historical Jesus, you know, obviously people might want to debate your theology, but these are good things, right? And a lot of people recognize Jesus as, well, yeah, he did these things and those things, and these are some pretty good things, and these are, why did he do these things? When we first started this whole right side up thing, you talked about the order and the rank.
Yeah.
And one of the amazing things I has come out of this kind of aha realization for me is that there's clearly, God is a God of order. Things are ordered. And of
Yeah.
course, if you look at the non-believing people who are just like, I'm a physicist and I'm going to go into the quarks and the leptons and I'm going to dive into quantum theory and all this stuff. And the deeper and deeper they go, there's order, and then there's a mystery.
Yes.
And so meaning that there's so much more to be discovered when I am observing the creation. But then on the flip side, you also see people who are saying, wow, look at this partnership I have when I put this seed in the ground. I don't germinate it. I just kind of kick the soil, put this thing in there. It rains from the sky, and I wait.
Yeah.
And of course, in crypto, that's called delayed gratification. Well, that's what farming is, right? You stick it in there and you wait, and it creates a harvest. And as a side note, I literally searched online. I'm like, how many kernels of corn are on an ear of corn? And it's like, oh, there's 816 rows. I'm like, what? So there's real order to all this. And oh, yeah, you can't have this ear of corn unless there's a male and a female plant. I'm like, hold on a second. So down to the very, you know, electrons, and down to like the Higgs boson, there's order. But then when you start sharing with me, hey, in the moment, in the presence, this is truly a partnership with the creator of the universe. And I think about all these people who are kind of the new agey people, right? And I think what the church has kind of taught me to look at them is like, oh, look at these poor people. And what I think is really incredible about kind of the people that are kind of what they would describe themselves as spiritual. What I really appreciate about people like that is that their curiosity, they're not rejecting that there's a creator. They're saying, hold on, there is clearly, evidently something that has ordered this thing, and there's real power and value behind it. Now, what they call it may be different than what I call it, but they recognize that, hold on a second. Well, if I align myself, right? Maybe I'm aligning my chakras, or maybe I am, meditating, or maybe I'm praying, or maybe I am, taking time out, or maybe I am sitting quietly, or whatever. There's a acknowledgement that there's some order to this thing that is meant to be aligned with who I am.
Yeah.
And so, what I think is amazing about this is if every single historical thing that Jesus ever did, or anything in the Old Testament that, walk around this place and blow your horns. Well, we did it 6 times and nothing happened. No, we got to do it one more time. So all of these stories and all of these things happened in a moment, and you wouldn't write them down if they weren't significant. And I would say every one of those stories is a story about a person in the moment seeing something manifest that they did not create.
Yeah. Yes.
So here's the thing I said. Why is it that it happened in the Old Testament, Steve? And then I meet you and I go, hold on. No, no, it's happening today.
Yeah.
We are just been lied to and told, no, you can't talk to Jesus. You can't have this conversation. You can't order your life with the creator of the universe. You've got to be essentially, enamored with this historical thing or this future thing. No, what it would it be like? And it's almost like he cut me in on the deal and told me the secret to the whole thing. Walk with me, walk with me. I'm a shepherd. I'm out front. I'm alive. I speak. I have a plan that I'm going to accomplish. You interested?
Yeah.
And when I say, yes, I'm interested, it's like everything becomes technicolor and things open up. And not that they're good, but that they have all of this fruit that is associated with them. I have more peace. I have more patience. I have more goodness. I have more faithfulness and thankfulness and self-control and all of these things that seem to be like transcend all understanding. A peace. And you go, hold on a second. So the thing everyone's chasing and trying to find is this settled sense of peace by being aligned with the very order of all that's created. And everything you've ever said to me, Steve, was these conversations you've had with Jesus are really telling you how he ordered things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's like something's out of joint. So what if we were to get these things back into joint? What would it look like?
Yes.
It looks like the kingdom, Steve.
It is the kingdom. That's right. It is the kingdom. Jesus doesn't operate outside the kingdom. I mean, that's where he is. The Father does not operate outside of his kingdom. That's why he's creating it. Here's another one that is it. See, we are taught so upside down. It's one of the great descriptions that Jesus gave to me when he started talking to me about being upside down and right side up. And we talk about all kinds of stories about that. And when it first began, I had no clue what he was talking about. I could define what upside down meant as a word, as a concept. I had no clue where I fit in that, how it applied to me.
Yeah.
Okay? And so it just taken a step to get there. I mean, for example, you're talking about all these things that you were experiencing, peace and joy and all these things. Well, we're taught that Jesus that gives those to us.
Right.
Well, no, he releases them in us. They're
Yeah.
already in there. That in that, the old
Yeah. Yeah.
Prego spaghetti sauce
Yeah.
commercial.
Yeah.
It's already in there. It just needs to be released. Well, what are you talking about, Steve? Well, don't we talk all the time about being made in the image and likeness of God? Well, what do you think is in us?
The image and likeness of God.
Yeah. Do you think he's a happy dude?
Yeah.
Do you think he's a peaceful guy?
Yep.
Do you think he's a guy that's content? Do you think he's a guy that's pretty innovative?
And patient.
Dude, man, the guy's got some skills, Well, I want to hang with the guy that got some pretty serious skills.
Yeah.
That's where I want to be hanging out. And so it's more about these things being released from what's already in us than it is him putting things in us that aren't there. No, they're there.
You know what's evidence of that? You said this a couple times ago. You said, because somebody was asking, well, do I have to do it the way you do it, Steve? And you say, well, what is your desire? What is your intent? What is your attitude? And you said, God's not going to get in the way of your free will. You can do good things and not be somebody who listens to Jesus.
Yeah.
And that is evidence to me that it is a part of who we are,
Yeah.
that we have this choice. I mean, I know many people who of many different kind of religious backgrounds who, if you got hit by a car out in front of their house, they'd probably run out front.
Yeah.
And they'd probably call 911 and help you. They wouldn't ask you who you voted for, and they wouldn't ask you what you believe. They just have compassion for people. And there's something inherently in us as we are created in the image and likeness of God himself that is resident in us. And that resonates with me.
Well,
That's
yeah.
cool.
Some of the most moral, ethical, upstanding, law-abiding people don't even want to consider the possibility that there is a creator being.
Yeah.
We call them atheists.
Yep.
What's that all about?
Yeah.
Where did they get that? If you want to talk about a God denier, there is one that is proud of it. And yet they can be some of the most moral, ethical, upstanding, law-abiding, community contributing,
Compassionate.
some of the best people. Well, where does that come from?
Yeah.
See?
And I think that's the dichotomy, because what they're hearing is so anemic.
Yeah.
It's not the full story. And it's like, and then of course, what is the fruit of that kind of dogma? It ends up becoming judgment, right? And so we deny relationship, and we deny community and communing with people because they don't believe or see the same things we do. But I keep seeing these things over and over again. There's a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Have you read that book?
I have not, but I have heard of it. Yeah.
Okay. So it was one of the first, I would consider it, for me, probably one of the earliest self-help books. Okay. And Napoleon Hill was a contemporary with Andrew Carnegie. And he was commissioned by Andrew Carnegie because, I don't know if you know this, but Carnegie basically neglected a dam that killed about 15,000 people. One of the most significant man-made disasters in American history.
Wow.
And it was because of the Hunt and Fish Club that he was a member of that didn't fix the dam, and it killed people downstream when it broke. Well, the Carnegie libraries that are across the United States, and there are so many different small towns have a Carnegie library. He thought that he could, with his philanthropy, and that's what he's known for. He was a steel magnate, but because he had wronged so many and felt so bad, he thought he could pay back God by giving away his resources. So one of the things he wanted to do was, he understood that, and this is really interesting, how he came to this. The book Think and Grow Rich is this idea that there is infinite intelligence. Okay, so you got to think about this is the 1920s, right? This is this time of the Industrial Revolution, and he was He provided the steel that built America. And he said, it is a function of your attitude. And of course, you see in self help so much this idea of manifesting and choose what you want, make a decision, write it down. You can be anything that you want to be. And of course, what do we see? We see story after story after story of the power of the will.
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, in that book, because it's not a Christian book, it's one of basically self help, but it uses the term infinite intelligence.
Mm.
And what's strange about it is a non-religious book was here is Andrew Carnegie trying to tell people that you can do anything in America if you choose it. And it's a choice of the will. You can choose this, but you have to recognize that there is one who created it all. And it is infinite in its intelligence, and it is the source of all that you will receive. And what is really fascinating about this is here's this secular book. And I see this a lot of times when people kind of don't use the Christian terminology, but use the framework.
Yeah.
And they say basically, look, there is one who created it all, and there's an order of those things. And if you recognize and come to that infinite intelligence and submit yourself to the fact that it's not you that has this, but essentially you're tuning yourself to the very nature of creation, that it unlocks abundance. And the irony of all of that is that it's true and it's deceiving all at the same time.
Yes.
And I think what's so interesting about this is it's the reason that we love every story of redemption about one who had come and saved the world. And it's also speaking to something that we know inherently about ourselves, that there is some value here.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's so cool about this, though, is to see that there there is this there's this story, and certainly the Bible plays a role in this story. But there's a lot of these stories that if you were to kind of distill them down, there is one who created it all, and then there were many others who created after. And when you talk about the Elohim and you talk about all these things, I'm really interested in all of this historical, literature that is, hold on a second, there is a structure and an order to this. And if you're willing to align yourself with it, you can get ahead. Well, in that is this concept that I want you to speak about.
Okay.
Somebody came to me and they said, "You are in grave danger." They wrote to me and they said, "You're in grave danger." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm in grave danger." Right. And of course, as a spiritually minded person, I'm like, "Oh no, what are you talking about? What's going on?" And this person said, "You need me to help protect you." Now, there's a lot to this, but that was the essence of it. You are in grave danger and you need me to protect you. So I was like, I got to ask Steve about this. And I woke up in the next morning, and Jesus said to me, "You don't need to ask Steve about anything." And I'm like, "Well, you're basically saying I need to ask you." And he said, here's what's going on there. Anytime fear is introduced into your life, there is a source of who's introducing it. I'm like, "What?" Okay, hang on a second. So you're saying that anytime I'm experiencing fear, there's a source of who is introducing that. And you are giving it permission to have power in your life. And so this person who came to me and said, "You're in grave danger. You need me to help you." I realized, hold on a second. That person is trying to insert themselves in the place I've put Jesus. So instead of the creator of the universe, there are those who are speaking into our life saying, "Trust me," but they don't have power unless you give them the authority to essentially be that protector or whatever it may be. And so I would love to have a detailed conversation with you about this idea of whether you call them spirits, whether you call them just fear in general, whatever you put the terminology on. it was extremely empowering for me to have this conversation in Revelation that said, they have no power unless you give them authority. Can you talk about that and what the practical nature of that is? Because there's so many people in this world who are dealing with depression, anxiety, fear, me included. I couldn't drive across town. To think that this is one who is trying to deceive me and take authority, and I'm giving it permission to have power over me, is a whole new idea and a revelation. Can you speak to that?
Well, yeah, you you just described it. I mean, and that one experience is the summation of everything we've been talking about from the day we met.
Yeah.
See, ask Jesus, ask him what's going on here. Yeah, any one of us can be used to facilitate, prime the pump, introduce, whatever those words are. And in our particular relationship, Jesus has put us together because apparently there's some things that I've experienced in my life and come to know with him that are useful to you.
Yeah.
See, but what is always the message is, Matt, you need to learn to talk to him about it, ask him about it. I can introduce you. Any other person can introduce you, but man, he's the guy that's going to blow your brains apart. He's the guy that's going to give you a peek inside stuff that you never understood. Not only did you not understand it, you didn't even have the grid to even form a question or an idea about it. See? And so what happens is, oh wow, I got to talk to my buddy Steve because we talk about this, and she says, hold on, man, Matt, what have you been doing, dude? Aren't you the guy that says that Jesus is alive and speaks?
Yeah.
Go ask him. Well, here I am.
Yep.
See, you want to talk about this or what? Of course, I'm, kind of providing some commentary around it, but that's essentially what is happening. No, you don't need to ask Steve about this one because I'm here to talk with you. We are doing this thing together. Now, let me open this up to you, Matt. See? And so that is that's how the kingdom functions. See, it says there's this funny little verse, if that's an appropriate way to describe it. People aren't going to go here and there telling everybody know the Lord, for they will all know me from the least to the greatest. Well, that little word know is a know by personal and direct experience. See, it's a very intimate know. Well, how does that happen? Name one person that you know intimately and personally that you don't have conversation with.
It's a really
Name
good,
one.
yeah. Not
Name one.
zero. Zero.
Zero. They don't exist because you can't know a person without, in that manner, without being able to have conversing with them. There are a lot of people who know a whole lot about Abraham Lincoln, but there isn't a one of them who knows him. They just know about him. And I've just described the overwhelming majority of Christians.
Yep.
They know about him. They're thrilled to know about him. They love what they know about him. They wish they could know more. But man, they've read that doggone book cover to cover so many times, been into so many church services to the point where, in your earlier comments, they've just come to the point where, okay, I've been around this. I've watched this program enough to where I don't need to watch it anymore.
Yep.
It's the same stuff. So now it's good for my kids because my kids haven't heard it yet. But there's nothing new that I'm receiving here. Well, what are they telling you? If we just step back and listen, what are they saying to us? Well, we can criticize the system. We can criticize the participants in this. We can go through all kinds of critical thought processes that essentially render it useless, or we can take another approach and say, Jesus, what's going on there? We've been at this for over 2,000 years. You mean to tell me this is the best you can muster? Now, why do I put it in his lap? Well, don't we call him the head of the church?
Hmm.
Don't we call him the head of the body? Don't we say that he's Lord? Well, dude, after 2,000 years, this is the best we can pull together. This is the best that you can do. After all, you don't need me. So, hey, because you don't need me, this is the best you can do. Well, see, that's not a criticism. That is an honest inquiry
Yeah.
about what is going on. What is our state of affairs here? Man, if we put this into a business framework, man, we would have been retooling this or trashing this program a very long time ago.
Right.
Why? For the simple reason is it is not producing more than it's consuming.
Yep.
It's consuming way more than it's producing. And by the way, we call that in financial terms, burning cash. We call it, losing money.
You're upside down is what we call it.
That's right. You're upside down. The debts are greater than the
Yep.
revenue or the assets.
Yeah.
You're upside down. Wow, why don't we try something different? Not of our construction, but maybe our application of the program is not right.
Yeah.
Jesus, what's going on? And so I kind of move that back to one of the things that you and I talk about so often, and you're demonstrating it here, is no, this is not about us looking to one another only. See, this is looking first to our partner, and by the way, just accepting that he's up for the job.
Yeah.
See, Matt, no, you don't need to talk to Steve. By the way, when that kind of fear comes, there's a very specific reason for it. Now, take a step back and let's learn what that reason is, so that, hey, this is not the first time this has happened. It won't be the last. So let's take a look at, now back to order and structure. Let's see how this thing actually works. Okay. Why is he trying to insert fear? Why doesn't he just come and do the deal? Why does he have to inject fear? If you're in trouble, why doesn't he just put you in trouble? If you're in danger, why doesn't he just put you in danger? You talk about it quite often. The lion who seeks to devour. Well, why is he seeking? Because he can't do it on his own.
That is such a big idea, Steve. This is at the very core of everything, that we're giving it permission. We're giving him permission.
See? That's the punchline. If he had as much horsepower as he professes, he would not need your permission. He would just do it. Right?
Folks, this is let's camp out on this for a second. I want to say hello to TechX. He's here. He was at the conference. And Firestarter 88. John is here. The man who wants to know the truth.
Yeah.
And I talked to him this morning. Call to me and I'll answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. And what's amazing to me, John, when I just even look at it, that Jeremiah 33:3, and now when I actually read the Bible, you know what it like jumps off the page is, wow, so call to me and I'll answer you. All of these things and all of this, all the Psalms and all of these things are like, I pant, I thirst for your engagement, right? I live from this. And I think what's really interesting is because there's so little demonstration of the practice of listening to Jesus, right? That's why this Christian entertainment thing that I saw is like I heard every sermon in one, which was Jesus is wonderful. Look what he's done. God has done amazing things. He has done these awesome things. Yay, God. But when it came down to the present, there was no application. And I don't mean no application, because here's the thing I will also concede. And I'm assuming you would have to concede this as well. I've seen the hand of God for the last 23 years, and I've only known you for the last 6, 8 months, right? He is the one who created it all.
Yep.
What I think is interesting, though, is this concept of maturity. I always kind of thought, well, I don't have to do anything. He's going to do it all. And there are times when like he just overwhelmed me with you got to go do this. And I'm like, I don't want to do this and I don't know what to say. And he's like, it's okay. I'll tell you what to say. I mean, I've had these things happen to me over the course of my life, but I didn't realize that he was so patient to wait in a way for me to seek him out. And what I think, I like to kind of grab onto handles of things that are really practical, like ask, seek, and knock. This idea, well, no, ask me, but you've got to have this attitude and desire of wanting that. Because I remember at Gen Con, I was talking to somebody and they said, well, how do we do this? And I was asking the same questions. Well, do you hear his voice, Steve? And you made this really good point. Is that it's supernatural, right? I can't put my thumb on it and I don't have the language to describe it. But I don't hear the audible voice of God. But the more and more that I expose myself to this conversation of, um, it's like he spoke to me in a revelation about this fear. And he said, you have the choice. It can't penetrate you. Cause I think I've been taught all this time that Satan is as strong as God. And what we're realizing here is no, no, no. Who I've made you to be is this knowledge of good and evil, this ability to choose and to have, you know, choice is it only has power if you give it power. And of course, it blows my mind to think that what would things look like if more and more people in the moment recognize that he was alive and he speaks and he's a shepherd who's out front and we recognize his voice. Because it seems like to me there's no middleman. There's no one you have to go through. You don't have to talk to Steve. You can literally. But I also recognize that I think that a lot of the times I think what I want Jesus to do, his currency isn't, you know, it's not defined the same way that I think of it as, right? I'm thinking of it as like I need the deal or I need this money or I need this thing to happen or please help this person who's sick. And what I'm realizing is like delight in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. What I realize is it's almost like I give you this peace and settledness that I think Paul said in any and every situation, I have peace in plenty or in want. And it's weird because I think that everything everyone's chasing is putting something in a place that they think will give them that peace. If I just had this, if it wasn't a bear market, if I win Lambo, if this relationship, or if I had this money, I could socially signal and then this beautiful woman might like me. It's like, I have these wounds that, I'm looking for someone to, and none of those things ever satisfy. And you go, I think the evidence and the proof of this being true is the fact that why can you why can you have peace in these tumultuous situations? And it's weird because it's not I do not give as the world gives.
Yeah.
That's like I do not give as the world. The world gives you possessions. The world gives you power. The world provides you this ability to accumulate or to lose. And it's like, no, no, what I give you is the thing that you have been created to desire, which is rest.
Yeah.
And then what's really weird about it is this idea, what do you mean I let go to receive? You mean I rest in you? Well, that's the acknowledgement that he's doing the work. And what's amazing about this whole crypto thing is I see this in the hex community. I see these people just going, I'm not judging you. I just love you. We're winning together. Let's high five. And the amazing thing about it is I get better relationships around crypto because you know what? People are like, I got nothing to sell you and you got nothing to buy.
Yeah.
Let's journey together in this in relationship. And there's something really beautiful about it because it's almost like it's undefiled.
Yeah.
And it's not holy, but there's something about it that is a picture of the order of creation.
It just needs to be released and unlocked. So he has you talk about, he commissions you to unlock generosity. Well, what does that imply? One, that generosity exists, it's behind locked doors, if you will. So it's already there.
Yeah.
You don't unlock something that's not there.
Amen
You
to
don't
that.
unlock something that is
Mm.
being held improperly, you know. Um, so it's already there. Generosity is already there. Well, how do we know that? Well, you described during the conference about the corn. Put a couple of those little seeds in the ground, and partner with both the creation he made in the form of the dirt and the seed, and with the with the rain that falls. And that's an entire partnership dynamic. Every bit of that is partnership. And when you partner with him, guess what happens? Those couple of little seeds in there will just explode into how many ever rows you were talking about, that in all the ears of corn that are on that stalk. And it's like, dude, that's generosity. It's there. It's in there. It's already there.
Wow.
See, I give you the keys of the kingdom. See, and you, with those keys, those who reside in the domain of death will have no power over you. They will not be able to overcome you. Why? Because you're the one with the keys. You're the one who unlocks, and you're the one who locks. You have the keys. Now, you don't have the keys by yourself. You have the keys in the context of the kingdom. Well, how does the kingdom operate? It operates on the with dynamic. There is no independent action in the kingdom of God. It's not designed that way. See, and the simplicity of that, now all of a sudden go to Paul's contentment. I'm content in every circumstance. I have learned the secret of contentment. Whoa, doesn't matter what state I'm in. Why? I've begun to learn that Jesus is proactive. He's ahead of the curve. He knows exactly what's going on here. I am not here by accident. I'm in a discovery mode. And the moment I discover it, man, things are going to start happening. Things are going to explode. So why? What am I going to do? I'm cool, man. Jesus, you got me here for a reason. What in the world was I thinking when I appealed to Caesar?
Yeah.
What the heck was I thinking? Well, Paul, didn't you say that we're buds? We're partners? See, I got things for you to do. This is where we go. I mean, how many people would have looked at Joseph and said when he was in the pit, that he was square in the center of God's will?
Wow.
Talk about lack.
Yep.
There wasn't one thing of abundance that he had, with the exception of the with dynamic with God. He had that in spades.
Yeah.
And he went from one place to another place to another place that not one individual in the modern era, particularly in the church, would have said that he was prospering in God. And yet he was being flooded with the enormity of the creative dynamic of God in every single instance, until the day came for that to happen. Hey, man, I had a dream. Anybody know about this dream? This dream is a killer, man. I know it was important. I do not acknowledge the God, the creator God. I don't have anything to do with him, but man, this thing's got me. And I just happen to be the most powerful human on the planet. My name is Pharaoh. And here it is. Anybody who knows this. Funny you should ask it. I knew this guy in prison.
Yeah.
He interprets dreams. And he said that my buddy was going to get his head whacked, and he said I would be restored to my position. He might be a guy you want to talk to. Perfect. Who would have ever put that plan together?
Right.
Who would have ever called that walking the path of prosperity, of abundance, of
Right.
whatever? No, the entirety of the visual image, anyone looking from the outside would see this guy was misused, abused, all the things that would indicate that God was not within a billion miles of that dude.
Right. Well, and you think of consider it pure joy, brothers, when facing trials of many kinds. You're right in the pit, and we've all been in the pit
Yeah.
of one form or fashion, and we've all been in Egypt, and we've all been calling out of that. But you talk about this partnership, right? We talked about the seed, right? And you've talked a lot about seeds in general, but you know what just struck me while you were talking there is I think about marriage, right? And I think about the dynamic between men and women. And I think about this idea of what is right, and I think about the differences of men and women, but I also think about male and female corn stalks, right? So
Yeah.
you can insert anything of the creative nature of God's creation. And I think about this, you know, what is the picture of oneness in marriage? And what is that? And of course, that's used as a metaphor in many things, right? Christ in the church, all these things about partnership and this idea of in partnership is what creates right is this there's a creative explosion as you said, right? This idea that hey, put it in the ground, all of these things work together and I wait and there's an abundance. And I think about that with just children, right? This idea that the beauty of the right relationship between man and woman is like the mystery of all mysteries. And if you've ever tried to do it right, you realize it's not an act of the will. It's
No.
not the act of force. It's actually the act of care, but also a partnership in a creative endeavor. And it's really interesting how you can't get away from it in every circumstance. I was doing the research on the corn. It's like, oh yeah, there's the male and the female corn, and the ones with the tassels that the wind has to blow, the pollen off, and it has to get on those fibers that are on the female plant. And I'm like, what? I mean, I guess I knew that, but I didn't really understand that. And to think that the very nature of creation and the wind blowing is a part of all of this. But it's also very similar to just, I just think about my wife and like when I'm actually aligned with and not trying to manipulate things, the beauty of the
Yes.
partnership.
Of the partnership. Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's like he continuously gives us this picture, and that in itself shows me the order, right? These things, you can look to the depths of the amoeba to the largest of animals, but you can also look in that these things are ordered. And you know what I think, my hope and desire in all of this is that we're using as creative a language as we possibly can to illustrate the gravity of the power
Yeah.
because I want to testify to the power because I don't want to keep it under a bushel, right? I really feel like this is too good. Like this is it. This is like if I were to like really distill it down into a marketing message, Steve, you've helped me see the true gospel. You've helped me see the secret to very life itself.
Yeah.
And then when I start reading the scriptures, I'm like, well, you're the vine and I'm the branches. Oh my goodness. So like, oh, hold on a second. This is just like electricity. The superconducting state is you doing stuff through me. What is heat but resistance?
Yeah.
And when we get something into its superconducting state, it travels through with no resistance.
Yeah.
I am resistant, which creates heat and all of this stuff. And it's like, no, when you're aligned with me, it's not your power, but I've chosen you as the conduit by which I accomplish the work that I've prepared in advance for you to do. And I go, that's it, Steve. That's it. And he's like a coach who's willing to walk with us in it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have expectation that we do it all.
Yeah.
And he wants us to do it with others.
Yes.
And so when I think about unlocking global generosity, it's so beautiful because it's like, what if we were to partner together in unity of thought and of unity of purpose and unity of care underneath this banner of alignment with the very creation of all. That's the kingdom of God. And it's like, wow. So everyone benefits, everyone has an incentive, and everything is ordered. Well, that kind of sounds like heaven, Steve.
Well, why the disciple who ran Jesus down and said, "Hey, man, will you teach us how to pray?" You know, I really don't think he was asking a mechanical question.
No.
He was asking an effectiveness question. You know, how come when I go pray, nothing happens,
Right.
but when you pray, dude, I want to do that. How do you live? How do you do that? And he said, "Hey, listen, as in heaven, so also in the earth." See, you're praying to somebody who is the most hallowed, most holy of all beings. And he has a plan, he has an intention, he is the source of everything. And all of that which exists is designed to accomplish one thing, his vision. That's why he does it. He is a man, he is a purpose, he is a being of purpose. He doesn't do this stuff for no reason. He didn't just throw it out there and say, boys, have fun with it.
Good luck.
You know, no, he's got a very specific purpose. And that purpose is, as in heaven, so also in the earth. That's what it is. So you step back. Anybody here know how heaven works? I don't. But gone, and I'm learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
How am I learning? Through the kinds of things that you just described. Matt, you don't need to ask Steve.
Yep.
You're talking to me. I'm talking to you. Let me show you how this works. Matt, that's heaven.
You know what's so empowering about it, Steve? Is I feel like I have the choice now to not fear again.
See? And by the way, if I could, nudge us, what it's telling you is that, back to his statement to you, there is a source.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you got going? Now here's where you start learning how to, in your role as an Elohim man. Okay, Jesus, how do you want to handle this source that is attempting to inject fear?
Mm.
How do you want to handle this? What do you want us to do with this being who is attempting to inject fear? Okay, now that he is disclosed, he, she, it is disclosed. They're in the theater of light. You couldn't see it. What Jesus did is bring you into his theater of light.
Yep.
He began to reveal to you things that are happening. You could not see them unless you were in his theater. You would just feel them and be
reactionary and react to them.
You'd be in a total state of reaction, probably panic.
Yep.
Your emotions were all of a sudden stimulated and incited in order to get you to react. And we've had the conversations about that. But once you see that, you start learning how to step outside of that. It's not denying the emotional effect. It's recognizing, hey, this one came with a pretty strong jolt.
Yeah.
There must be something going on here that's pretty significant. You learn to step outside of it, take a more macro view. Jesus, how are you seeing this? What is it that you're seeing that I need to see here? What are you thinking about this thing? I see what I'm telling you, you know what I'm feeling here. This thing is coming with some pretty good intensity. What's going on here? How do you want us to respond to it? What do you want us to do with it? What happens is your vocabulary starts shifting, as we were talking the other day, from a first person vocabulary to a plural vocabulary.
Yep.
You start speaking the language of partnership, the with dynamic. How do you want us to handle this? Okay. And all of a sudden, what begins to start happening, you start seeing things as they are, not as they are packaged to appear to be. Ah, boys, we're going to the other side of the lake. It's been a long day. I'm going to take a snooze. Remember our little
Oh, yeah.
conversation the other day?
Yep.
Yep. I'm going to take a snooze. Your professional sailors, get us to the other side. I'm gonna knock off a few Z's here. Boy, they get midway and the storms start going crazy, so much so that these guys who lived on the sea were terrified. And they shake him and wake him up. It wasn't the storm that woke him up.
Right.
Isn't that fascinating? It wasn't the tumultuous nature of the storm, the power of the storm as the disciples perceived it. It was his disciples who woke him up. Hey, man, don't you care that we perish? What's up? Well, the storm. Okay, boys, let's hold on here. Did I not say that we're going to go to the other side? Well, yeah. Have you not learned and observed that I do nothing apart from my Father? Whatever he says for me to do, that's what we do. Whatever he tells me to say, that's what I say. Wherever he tells me to go, that's where I go. So he told us to go to the other side. Why are you afraid? Now, what's fascinating about that, I've heard that sermon 1,000 times, maybe not 1,000, maybe 100 or so in my life. And every time it comes with a connotation of a lack or criticism directed from Jesus toward the disciples. No, it is a fundamental question. Why are you afraid? Matt, the next question is, why are you afraid? What is it that you are doing or you are about that is so significant that there is somebody who has been dispatched to intercept that? And the key that they are using is the key of fear. Matt, why do you think it's using fear? Why is it coming at you like that? What is happening behind the scenes? That whatever it is that you're doing, they need to try to regain control of that. Wow, Jesus, that's a great question. That's why you take a step back and ask me what I'm thinking, because I'm about to show you some things about how this thing works. And when you learn how it works, you begin to walk in the Elohim that I have created you to be. And they are terrified that you will begin that journey.
Wow. So, what's amazing is you tell that story and I see so many things, and I'm sure so many people that are watching this are seeing the same thing. What does a storm represent? But what is the perceived challenge? Okay. So I could say that storm in my life appears so many different ways.
Yes.
It happens to be on a lake, it happens to be on a boat, and it happens to be, but that picture is a story of my entire fearful life.
Yeah.
But there's also a caveat of this that I want you to speak into as well. God has given us feelings and neurons and has given us one of the greatest things about pain is actually its protection.
Yes. Yes.
And I think what's really unique about this, and I think is so big of an idea, is the storm as a metaphor for the crises that pull us off sides, right? It's the introduction of fear, right? Brandon,
The misdirection.
the misdirection, right? So Brandon, the meteorologist, would go, "That ain't nothing. That's just a squall," right? He would say, "That's not a double internal structure of a supercell thunderstorm. We got nothing. There's no problems here. We don't have big updraft. There's no there's no hail. I got nothing to fear, right? Knowledge of those things versus the child who flies on a plane the very first time and when it takes off thinks they're going to die.
Yeah.
But that perspective is so strong. But I also want to say this. You gave me some counsel that was just absolutely amazing. And it really fits into this. And I think is a great application for people. I was having chest pain and I'll have it kind of come and go. And it's crippled me with fear. And I remember we were about to get on a stream and I said, "Hey, Steve, I'm having that thing again I was telling you about, and I'm really scared." Do you mind telling people what you told me?
Um, sure. It was, as I recall, it was, okay, if there's fear here, okay, we probably need to take start looking at why the fear is there, but take a step back, look at it. Jesus, is there anything here I need to be concerned about? If he says no, then okay, you take a look at that thing and you just move right through it as if it was not there. You move right through it. Now, if he tells you to pay attention to it, then you pay attention to it. As I recall the exchange, that is what's coming to mind. Is there some other things that struck you?
No, and I think that's the application of this is here's the storm, whatever it may be. And I'm going to insert a couple different examples of this.
Yeah.
I counsel a number of friends of mine on I'm the guy people complain about their wives too. Okay. So I'm the guy who listens, right? And I'm sure no one's ever had a problem with a spouse or a girlfriend, boyfriend, or anything like that and be frustrated, right? And have a friend and say, "Hey, man, I'm just so frustrated with this thing." And one of the things I recognize, when you told me about Peter and he's like, Satan, get behind him, right? Like Peter is not Satan. Satan is in this situation. But this whole idea that the crises, whether it be the storm or the chest pain or someone who knows you so well, who knows how to push your buttons, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think about this, the dynamic of close relationships is that when we know someone, we know how to draw them off sides.
Yeah.
And I think about this when I play that game, when I know I could, like, for example, you see this in contemptuous language between spouses,
Hmm.
right? Is that when somebody escalates something to a point which changes the narrative, right? Let's say there's something we're trying to resolve, but I say to you something like, "You've always been this way, and I never should have married you, Steve."
Yeah.
Right? We went from a disagreement to like 100 miles an hour. And what does that do? It inserts this offsides. It draws us into something new that is really, really dangerous and damaging, right? And it's interesting to think that, many people within the church have heard about this concept of the devil getting a foothold. And I think about where things creep in for me. Some of it would manifest in a disagreement that escalates. Some would come in the manifestation of, "Oh no, what if I'm dying?"
Yeah.
Right? You can go to these extremes. It draws you off sides. "Oh no, the storm. How are we going to do this? We better wake up Jesus." Right? But when you say, if I can back out of each and every situation and say, "Hey, how do you see this?" You know what he might say, Steve?
Yeah.
"This is serious. You need
Yeah.
to get some help."
Yep. Absolutely.
But he also might say, "Nope, let's move through this." And I thought about that. Yeah, it doesn't look like, but I've run 5 half marathons.
Hmm.
And I remember when I was training, I didn't, so the person that was encouraging me to do this, I'm like, "There's no way I can run 12 miles, or whatever it was." And I had to get through a really difficult wall in my training of my own fear of I can't go any further. And what ended up happening one time is, and of course I got blood sugar issues and all this, is I took some this gel stuff. It's glucose gel, with me on this long training run, and it was the first time I'd ever run, maybe 15 miles. And I got to that wall where I thought I could go no further, and I ate.
Hmm.
And when I ate and I kept going, it was as if I was anew.
Wow.
And it was really interesting. And so that metaphor of breaking through these walls, right? Or overcoming this fear is actually, it's almost like we break through something to discover something new.
Yeah.
And I look at those situations and I go, well, I don't want to be passive, right? But what is Jesus ultimately in this? Is the truth, the way, and essentially kind of a de-escalator of inappropriate fear and
Yeah.
inappropriate drawing off sides and inappropriate crises and inappropriate, because essentially I feel like the foothold that the evil one gets into is you're so easy to manipulate because you don't listen to the guy who's got you.
Yeah.
And so what has this done for me? It's transformed my marriage.
Yeah.
Because I don't go into the house anymore thinking, "What can I get? Who owes me what? What points do I need?" I just literally say, "All right, Jesus, what are we doing?" And then my wife looks around and goes, "Why did you just clean up all the counters and do all the dishes? And why are you running around so much and doing this and that and the other?" I'm like, "Well, because that's what needs to be done." And what's weird is she'd used to make me this list and like have to like, and I'm like, "Oh man." And I would say things like this, "Oh, I'm going to my second job." Right, I'd do all this work at work, and then I'd come home and have to do this second job. And what was amazing about this is this revelation is giving me this idea that, hold on a second, if my job is to bless and protect in the nature and character of the one who created it all, he'll tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's like everything reorders, Steve.
Totally reorders.
And then my wife responds to me like, "Hey, you're actually kind of a good guy, not a total jerk." It's
You
weird.
waited.
It's counterintuitive.
Well, if I may, and right now, what's striking you is the power element,
Mhm.
and that's one of the things that you start recognizing very quickly is things start to happen. That's essentially what all power is it is an enabling component, um, to to produce something or to move something that wasn't previously capable of either moving or being produced. Um, but the further you get into this, and you'll notice it both with the heart thing that you were talking about just a moment ago when we went through that. Okay, step outside of it. See, take a look. What are you doing in that moment? You're saying, no, there's only one who gets to speak to me,
Yeah.
with authority. I feel that. I'm not ignoring that. I'm paying attention to that. But that does not get to rule me.
Yeah.
See? And so this is how the Elohim expresses its rulership. See? It steps outside and then says, Jesus, how do you see this? Only you have the ability and the authority to speak, to direct.
So fear has no authority to speak to me.
It has no authority. You've already declared that.
Yeah.
Now, what happens? Do you think for 1 second that fear is going to accept that just because you said so? Hey, no. The source of the fear is saying, BS, dude, I don't believe you. Let's try this. See, boink in the heart.
That's the whole story of Job, man.
That's it. Boink, you got it. Now let's see how you handle that one.
Yeah.
How you doing there, Matt?
Yep.
Well, I don't know, man. No, Matt, step outside. The moment you step outside of that and literally see yourself doing it, stepping outside, observing Jesus, what do you see here? How do you want to handle this? Is this something we need to pay attention to? See? And guess what? I've told you my own story on the kidney cancer
Yeah.
thing. And boy, I was far enough along to know he was going to answer me. And
Yeah.
so the greatest challenge for me was asking the question and knowing he was going to answer it.
Yeah.
See, that was my particular place where I had to grow beyond where I was to where I needed to yet go.
Yeah.
But all of this is, yeah, we see the power dynamic of it, but what's actually happening, Matt, is you're coming into the authority of God as he distributes it to Jesus, who now possesses all authority, who then relegates a portion of that to us. We're coming into what kingdom authority looks like.
Yeah.
See? And when you step outside of that and you partner not with the fear, not with the pain, but you learn to partner with Jesus, guess what? You start operating in his authority. And then he sets things in place for you to move. Now, in many of the health and wellness kinds of places in the church, you're taught that you have the authority of the believer where you can do that yourself. Well, I've seen I've not seen that happen. I see blanks. And by the way, I was a huge believer in that at some point. But again, it was, I grew up in a high performance environment where virtually everything you did was documented. And so I get, you know, what keeping score looks like and what it does and what the purpose for all of that is. See? And guess what? I was losing not only a lot, but I was searching for a win. I
Yeah.
had all of the theology of winning. I had all of the concepts of winning. I had all of that need. I just didn't have any experience of the winning. It was like, whoa, dude, is this just a concept? And then Jesus says, man, didn't I tell you that the kingdom of God was not about words only, but of power? Yes. Well, what does that look like? Well, how do you think power is released, Steve? Man, I didn't have an answer. I just thought it was supposed to, magically appeared because, whatever it is that I thought at the time. No, you learn to operate in my authority with me, and you'll see all the power you need to see. But it will be related to the accomplishment of my Father's vision. Steve, are you content with that? Now we're back to content. Steve, are you content with that?
Yeah.
Wow, not only am I content, I'm on fire for it. Let's do that.
You know what's when people say God loves you,
Yeah.
and it seems so at times so like generic. When you describe it this way and you start seeing the fact that love is displayed in its desire to partner with you, right? So we think of it in terms of, following one who is out front. Think of how he feels about you being willing to follow.
Oh man, right on. Right
You know what I
on.
mean? Like this idea that,
Yeah.
who is he? And I think that the analogy in this idea of father son kind of thing, right? This protective, but also I think about, why do I appreciate our relationship so much? You have something that I consider to be valuable. And if I can engage with you in this and you're willing to be patient enough and you find it of joy and it's satisfying to you to pass along these things to me, is just a picture also of what I pass along to my son.
Yes.
Right. And I think about how much I love my son. And I'm like, hold on, God, the it's weird because I also often talk about worship not being a posture, right? Not being a hands grasp and the eyes closed or on your face or whatever, but this reverence of understanding that even in the very nature of him choosing an agent, meaning his son, right? Because you think about this: could the Almighty God have come here? Yeah, he could have like destroyed it all, right? But no, no, no. He chose to partner, right? And he literally chose his son as the agent who was there to create all, and takes that same structure, and it's like infinite in its resolution, meaning I get to experience it with you. I get to experience it with my son. I get to experience it with others. I get to experience it at Gen Con. I get to experience, and it's like, hold on, no, this is a constant reminder and picture of partnership and cooperation
Yeah.
and submission and honoring, and it's willful and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just so amazing. And and I think that, that's where I think a lot of the source of worship, true worship, comes from, is just like, I'm overwhelmed by the peace of knowing that I'm not alone and I'm not here by accident, and I'm not just this descendant of a monkey who is just waiting for the lights to go out in fear that I'm just going to have a heart attack and die, right?
Yeah.
And so I really, really appreciate it because, in a way, it's funny. We talk about listening to Jesus. Well, he speaks in so many different forms.
Yeah.
He speaks through you, Steve.
Yeah.
He speaks through the Bible when I read it. He speaks through friendship. It's funny. If you read my journal, you'd be like, these things are miraculous. They're very similar to the things I read in the Bible. Yeah, because they were inspired by God. Why? Because he did them.
Yeah. That's
And
right.
I wrote them down. I'm not writing a new account. I'm not Paul. This isn't like the Council of Nicaea, but it's still true. It still happened. We've got some people in the chat who've asked some questions, Steve. So I think this is an appropriate time for us to kind of get into that, if you're cool with it.
Sure. Absolutely. They're invited. I mean, that's why
Yeah.
we're doing this. Come on in.
So we're going to get to these folks, but Texan Tailgate says, do you believe that all endings are predetermined, or does our free will allow for flexibility in the outcome of what we call the future? That's a brilliant question.
Yeah, that is spot on. That Texan tailgate. Yeah, you're wrestling. I don't know if wrestling is the right word.
This is Forrest, by the way. His name's Forrest.
Is Forrest.
Yeah.
Yeah. This in the religious world. This is kind of I'm going to use some religious language here of Calvinism versus Arminianism and all of this stuff, which are attempts to describe in absolute terms that then obligates others to that belief system. So it's essentially a belief system. It's not how the kingdom of God works. The kingdom of God does not work within the framework of belief systems as we understand that. There is this dynamic that we've talked about called proaction. And the dynamic of proaction is that that God speaks, and when he speaks, then everything around it then exercises a choice related to it. Okay, without getting too much, choice is one of the fundamental components of infinity. And so within the context of the order of the creation, choices exist because that's what produces infinite expression, infinite opportunity. It keeps 1 second from 1 second continuing after another second, kind of a dynamic. And so when God speaks, things start relating and reacting to that. And the nature of proaction is every one of those secondary actions is following the first action of the first speaking. Okay? What does that mean? Is that our free will operates freely without condition, without coercion, without encumbrance, and it does not change the outcome that God proactively spoke, to where it does not change the outcome that he spoke. It affects the condition that we experience that outcome. Okay? So, do you believe that all endings are predetermined? Well, if he says, light be, guess what? Light was. So, That was predetermined if you use that term. He spoke light to be because he determined that light was going to be. Okay? So, or does our free will allow for flexibility in the outcome of what we call the future? Well, there's a lot in that. Flexibility in how? Flexibility in how we experience it, flexibility in how we manipulate it, flexibility on the condition upon which that outcome occurs, the condition upon which we experience that outcome. I mean, there are 1,000 different questions around that. So the short answer is it doesn't affect the outcome that God prescribed. It does affect how we experience that outcome, and that his command, if you will, is capable of dealing with all of the reactions that occur to it, and every single one of them will contribute to the outcome he prescribed.
Wow.
Now, let me tell you what, I did not communicate that to you because I'm a really good studier about, sovereignty and all that stuff. That's how he described it to me. And now I'm passing that on to you. So in God's creation, when he says you have free will, you have free will. And he will not intrude on that free will. He'll not coerce you. He'll not try to sit down and sell you the program. He'll just start always present. And in times when you start to consider him, all of a sudden he's there. That's the whole, two soldiers in a foxhole kind of thing. What do they say? There's no atheist in a foxhole.
Yep.
Why? Because we're created in his image and his likeness is being developed in us. So there is an internal awareness that something is bigger than us. Well, that bigger has the capability of proacting.
Yep.
And everything around it follows that first proaction.
What's interesting about it? I really like this question because I think about this stuff all the time, right?
Yeah.
Does it matter what I do? And of course, I reflect on actions that I take, right? So, I've led in business, right? And one of the things I've recognized in the very framework of creation is that a lot of people, it's easier to be critical than to be creative. And one of the things I see is as we are exercising his likeness in the creative nature, right? This idea of we could choose a lot of different things. I could choose to plant tomatoes versus corn. I could choose to build a new product based on listening to my client. But I recognize that so often those that are creative, and Forrest is a very creative person. He's a musician, very, very gifted, very, very well educated. And he knows that there's this really interesting partnership that happens when he writes lyrics or songs, or is it's a very spiritual process, partly because you're like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
And you
Right.
see this thing manifest itself, and it's like, but there's a discipline to it, right? I do have to plant the seed to get the tomatoes. I have to sit down and think and listen, and and then there are these gifts given. And I think one of the beauties of life is, we see this a lot of times in art, and we see these things in creative ventures that it's almost something that takes your breath away. It's almost like you see an image of God. You see a picture of it, right? You see it in the dancer in a move. You see it in a painting. You see it in nature. You see it in love. You see it in a child. And there's something about it that just is, you breathe in. You're just like inspired by it, and you see it. And that to me is like where this rubber meets the road with this partnership. But this idea that if we have a father who loves us, right, and has this plan for us, what I sense from you is the outcome of the whole thing we can take to the bank. There's light, there's dark, there's all these things. But in the context of this, you are like me. You are not me, but you're like me. And the amazing things is the promises that I see in the scriptures of what could life be like if you were rightly related to me and you listened to me and you followed me. It's like you have not because you ask not. Like
Yeah.
tap into this thing. And so Forrest does that in his music creation, and he gets so like blown away. He's like, I have no idea where this song came from. And then people listen to the song and they see something, and he's like, it was like a gift.
Yeah.
That partnership comes in so many different layers, and it's so beautiful. And I think that, what is the result of that proaction and that partnership? Peace, contentment, joy, all of these things that make life so beautiful, right? And it's almost like resting in its alignment, like it lifts up a picture of the kingdom. The beauty of that. It says that there's no temple in the center of the new place. Why? Because he is in us. There he is our light.
Yeah.
And I think that's so amazing. So I'm just yeah, that's just me like verbally vomiting my thankfulness.
Well, and we can see this all around us. See, Forrest, as you're describing, he is acknowledging something that is happening. Well, what is that? Well, Forrest was he was fashioned in his mother's womb, if you will, or he was created before time began to occupy a certain role in God's creation. See? Now, nothing is going to change that role.
Yeah.
Forrest's decisions around that and choices around that will affect his condition, the
Yeah.
condition in which he's going to experience that. And what you're describing is he is experiencing some kind of awe or joy, recognizing that, wow, something is at work that I don't understand, but it is powerful, profound, and pretty daggone amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there you go.
There you go. Pulse Chain Trainer says, how do we help those around us who have plenty but can't see that they are get to a place of gratitude? Yeah, people who I've met folks like this, Steve, who have amassed a lot, and they're
Yeah,
like, I've worked hard for this. This is mine. I've stepped on heads and necks to get this stuff. And who was really evident of this was Steve Jobs. People
yeah,
are like, you have all of this money and all this stuff. Why aren't you, more generous? And he's like, I made the thing that enables you to do so much. I don't need to give you any more.
yeah.
And it's interesting, like this like angst of no gratitude. What would you say?
And by the way, is this Chad?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay, very good. Um, what I would say is, how do we help others around us who have plenty but can't see that they are get to a place of gratitude is an attitude, and if you don't have it, you just don't have
Yeah.
it. And there's just no you you can help by maybe sharing your own story. There is this thing called the kingdom of God. It's like a man sowing seed, and how that seed grows and germinates, he doesn't know, but the elements come together and produce until there's a harvest. So part of it is just sowing the idea of attitude and gratitude, not one of imposing attitude and gratitude.
Yeah.
Okay? And if that person has anything in them of interest, eventually one day they'll start learning to be grateful.
You know what has been impressed upon me is it ceases to be generosity if it's mandated,
Yep, that's
right?
exactly.
And when I like, I think about the state and I think about the structures of government and things, and it's like, everybody wants to redistribute wealth, and they want it to be essentially a centralized, we'll give you universal basic income, or this, we'll give you the handouts, and obviously that comes with all these strings attached of being a ward of the state. And what's really amazing about this idea of generosity is, this outflowing of abundance is that, yeah, it ceases to be generosity if it's a requirement. And I think that that's what's so cool about this is it's okay. It's okay if you don't have gratitude and all that stuff. Because one of the things I found, and it seems like the very nature of creation is I wouldn't have gotten to this place unless I'd been completely destroyed and meaning emptied, right? I had all this hubris and all of this, like I can do all of these things and look at, everything I touch turns to gold and look at how good I am. And then I went through 10 years, Steve, 10 years of absolute destruction. Now, there's preserved my family in incredible ways, but when it came to, like, financial and I had a friend, I told you about Greg who died of colon cancer. He had me talk to a buddy just out of the blue. He's like, "You need to talk to this guy." And this guy says, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said, "Oh, not good, man. Things are bad." He's like, "What's wrong?" He goes, "How's your family? How's your marriage? How are your kids?" I'm like, "They're fine, they're fine." He goes, "You don't have problems."
You don't have problems. You have irritations. You don't have
He said, "You
problems.
don't have problems." He goes, "The greatest challenge you could ever have is financial." I was like, "What? This is so hard." He goes, "No, no, no, no."
No.
Just he basically said to me, "Have you ever lost a child?"
Yeah.
And it just like, wow. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, okay. Thank you." So in a way, in the storm, in the learning of that pain and those challenges got me to this point where instead of squeezing everything, I opened my hands and I said, "All right, you know better than I do. And if I align myself with your plan, hold on a second, this is where it all comes together." And so that's why I feel like it's like the secret. Wow, we got this secret.
Yeah.
Hex Toshi says, Matt, God has been speaking to me all this week in different ways. You two have just helped me see it more clearly by physically feeling his word inside. Thank you, godly men. Hex Toshi, that is amazing.
That's what
And
it's all
thank you for sharing that. And I think one of the things that's unusual, Steve, is the nature of this conversation in public.
about.
We do this in private and here we are doing it in public and it's like I've got zero fear because in a way, and let's talk about this. One of the principles I've known for a long time is that transparency builds intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I jokingly say, if we were stuck in an elevator together with a group of people and we were there for any extended period of times, we'd be fast friends. Why? Because somebody'd have to urinate. And you're like, "Where do you go?" Right? And we get to know each other pretty well, pretty fast.
That's right.
But there's this shared experience too where you just go, "Okay, this transparency of understanding these things, we're constantly covering that which is different. We're constantly in fear of judgment. We're constantly, well, if I shared with you that my mother had, schizophrenia, if I told you that my father was an alcoholic, if I told you these things, so many people are fearful of those. But every time I share them, it loses power over me.
Yeah.
And whenever I articulate those fears and whenever I literally expose these things, they're brought into the light and their power dissipates. Can you speak to that? This idea of being transparent and being authentic and sharing these things with others? Because there's so many men who I think are suffering in silence. They're literally suffering in silence.
Well, and there's a spiritual um, being. There's this term called the spirit of the age. And that spirit has obtained authority to function. And as we've talked about, when it's the spirit of darkness operating in that, they're getting that authority from us. And that authority then begins to blanket over. And since the 60s in particular, men have been hammered big time because of the way the Lord described it to me, this authority inversion strategy that's being played out in our time, where the whole authority structure that got set in place is now being dismantled so that the one who has the least amount of authority is now put in a position of having the highest authority, and the one, which is the child, by the way, and then the one with the least amount of authority, the greatest amount of authority is put in the position of the least amount of authority, which is the man.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing all kinds of expressions, about that right now. And it's extremely effective. And men are being neutered. So now let's take your fear thing example again. Let's step outside that and start saying, okay, Jesus, what about that? How are you seeing that? What is it? What exactly is happening here? What is the strategic purpose for this dynamic occurring, especially in our time? And who benefits from that? Do you benefit from that, Jesus? Does my family benefit from that? Does society, who benefits from this dynamic occurring in our time where men are actually neutered? How is that working? What's going on there? So instead of getting mad about it, step back and understand it and then say, oh, okay, so that's how this works. And now let's get back to, the trainer's deal. Hey, man, you just be the grateful guy and you demonstrate that.
Yeah.
See, not out of compulsion or trying to teach or train, or just be who you are.
Yep.
And guess what? That will have rippling impact throughout. Men, step up.
Yep.
Be the man of God. Be the man of the house. Be the man that God created you to be. Be an Elohim man. And watch what starts happening. Okay? And let me tell you what. The intruders are terrified that we get this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If we get this, I mean, I'm telling you, it is a matter of, I'll put it in this context. How many of us anticipated the collapse of, the wall in Berlin?
Yeah.
How many of us anticipated that? One day, it's gone. One day. The Soviet Union, at the time considered to be the most powerful nation to rival the United States, in one day collapses. Well, gee whiz, there's that kind of same statement in Revelation, right? Babylon collapses in one day.
Burns in an hour.
How does that happen? Right? I wake up one day, it's there and powerful. The next day I wake up and it's gone. How does that happen? Put it in the context of a 60-minute deal in an hour. Man, I blink and it's gone. How does that happen? That's how fragile this intrusive system is that we're dealing with. So, men, step up, but step up with Jesus.
Yeah. Yep.
I think you'll like it.
Forrest said, in this day and age, I always think back to what my mama used to say. God is not the author of deceit. Once you start talking with him as a friend daily, it's amazing. Peace and clarity overcome all. How wonderful that you had a mamaw like that. Who's like, and my grandmother said, she's like, he's always been enough.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? That's that picture of him standing alone.
Yes.
So it's so cool. Crispy man, what's going on, man? Thanks for dropping by. Viber Finance, thanks for being here. Everything is still a free with realm, even as demonic as the agenda is.
Yes.
Taryn, thanks for being here. Ty Bull, what's going on? KDM, walk the walk. Thanks for another great stream. Absolutely. Well, we've approached that time again, Steve, where time seems to go much faster than it. Can you believe it? 2 hours?
It just blows by. Yeah.
It does. It really does. And so I really, really thank you. It was so cool to have you at Gen Con. I'm hoping to get that talk that you gave because we recorded it. And I want to share that with folks because you did a talk on kingdom companies. But there was a thing that I'd like to talk about the next time we get together, which was you talked about, and this is just a cliffhanger for our next one. But you talked about looking up at high places. You talked about this idea of for and with, and I really want to dive into those things next because when you started speaking at the conference, I mean, you could have heard a pin drop, and it's not because you're just some eloquent speaker, Steve. It's because people are recognizing that there's real truth, right? You're testifying to the truth and representing extremely well, in my opinion, helping people understand the nature of Jesus in the moment. And what I love about this is it's very practical. And I think back to the beginning of all this, right? This Christian entertainment that I'm hearing, it's great. It's what my itching ears would love to hear. But what I love about this is real, tangible, in the moment. What should we be doing?
Yeah.
And this idea that it's not muscling it, it's not grabbing the bull by the horns. It's actually by listening to the one who created it all, has a plan for you, and will direct and give you insight, infinite
Yeah.
intelligence. Um, so it is great to see you. Any final thoughts or observations before we head out?
Yeah, maybe just a visual image,
Okay.
um, and you can go and read about this. And I encourage you to, to use some of the Bible apps to actually look at some of the definitions of the words through the passage. But there is this passage where Jesus goes to this place, and it's referred to as the Gadarene demoniac. And for those who are familiar with the story, he lived in the caves and in the tombs and up there, and he was possessed of of an enormous number of demons. Okay, they called themselves legion, and in those days, I think a legion could be somewhere between 3 to 6,000 um, troops, Roman troops. So this dude was carrying a load, right?
Mm.
And what's fascinating about this, and I'm going to take just a second if it's okay, is that there was nothing that those demons possessed in all of their numbers and all of their power, because remember, he was able to break chains, ropes and chains. The townspeople tried to bind him in ropes. They tried to bind him in chains. He screamed. He just if you can imagine the ruckus that this guy created for the townspeople and how he injected fear in them.
Yeah.
Okay. When this guy who was possessed by a legion of demons, who cut himself and could break chains, when he saw Jesus, he bolted to Jesus, and all the power that those demons could muster could not keep that man from just hightailing it to Jesus. He just bolted and beeline. So the first thing I'd like you to think about is, if somebody wants to be grateful, if they see Jesus, there is nothing that's going to keep them from learning how to be grateful. If there's someone who wants to learn how to listen to Jesus, there's no power in creation to keep them from learning how to do that. If you want to make a beeline to Jesus to learn this, there is no power in creation that will keep that from happening. Because I don't think you have 6,000 demons inside you trying to keep you from doing that. That's the first thing. Second thing, Jesus is in the temptation. We see the exchange there. He goes according to his custom into Capernaum, and he then goes into the synagogue, and they hand him the book. He didn't choose the book. They handed it to him, and he goes to the place and he says, "Hey, folks, today, this verse, the favorable year of the Lord, is now fulfilled in your hearing this very day. And all of these things you're going to see start to happen." And when they first heard that, they go, "Oh my goodness, what great words those were." And they start becoming overcome. What gracious words we're hearing, until it dawned on him what he was saying. Hey, this dude is claiming to be the Messiah. We have been waiting for this guy for centuries. But if someone dare mention that they are he, we cannot tolerate that. And all of a sudden they became enraged. They then ushered him to the edge of the cliff to throw him off the cliff. And the moment they got to that place, Jesus just stopped in the way the language is, and he then passing through them, removed himself from them and left them standing on the cliff. Now back to the Gadarene demoniac. Where did those demons request that they could now occupy?
The pigs.
The pigs. And where did the pigs end up going?
Off the cliff.
Off the cliff.
Wow.
No, I understand who you are. I understand who it is that you're dealing with. And though you are moved at this moment to throw me, your Messiah, off the cliff, that is not what's going to happen. They, according to their own standard of measure, will be thrown off the very cliff they're trying to throw me off of. That's what we're dealing with. See, we don't understand it, but they understand it. And the moment we come into it, let me tell you what, they are terrified. So keep it up, man. Keep going. Just keep going.
Well, and I think so many men, especially in crypto, what do we want? And I think in our flesh we say we want Lambo, right? And what is that a representation? It's a meme, right? It's a meme. It's a representation of I've made it.
Yeah.
And what is this manly thing but power? And what we're saying, and what I think is so incredible, is that this power is actually what works through you.
Yeah.
And it's not your physical source of power. And I think that if you want to, I think about, especially in sports analogies, we want to win. What does winning in life mean? And so many things as you read the scriptures show about treasures that are in heaven, not here, right? And it's not that you can't have resources and that you can't have Lambo, right? That's certainly not what we're saying. But in the context of this is that he does not give as the world gives, right? Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. And I think that how incredible would it be to see, I think, a future in which all this money and all this representation of power on earth is actually being used as a mechanism to attract people to the truth of who he is.
Yeah.
And to me, what an amazing journey that we can be on, because it separates itself from all of the tethers of that have turned so many people off from this, right? We desire to have certainty about things, and to think that no single story, no verse has ever been written that didn't reflect a moment that happened.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you so much for today. Another amazing time with you. I just, I got so many things to think and talk about now. So thank you, Steve. I really appreciate you taking the time today. And it was so wonderful to have you at Gen Con.
Very good. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All righty. Folks, once again, God sees you at the corner of his eye. I want to be aligned with the one who created it all, right? I just want to order my life that way. And I feel like as I attempt to do that and try, I have one who's extremely patient with me. And folks, we got work to do, but also understanding that what is the proof of the effectiveness of this following of Jesus has, produced in my life is a rest and a peace that, we can live without fear. So this is really unique, right? I do these streams. I'm not pumping up Pulse X or Pulse. We're not talking about single-sided staking. I'm not worried about all of these things, because it's actually in the bottom that we learn the greatest lessons. And so as we get rebuilt and we see a next bull run, I think we're going to see some amazing things happen in this world, and you get to be a part of that. And so I just hope for you the peace and the joy of rest, right? And not chasing, but also letting go and receiving that which has been designed since the beginning. So this has been like the most incredible journey with Steve Staggs over the last, 8 months for me. But I hope that it's a blessing to you. And the fact that it's documented, maybe my kids will watch this at some point. Maybe it'll kind of rub off on them. That'd be really nice. Folks, take care of yourself. Thanks so much for joining. And do not lose any hope because there is a plan. You are not the descendant of a monkey. You were created for a purpose. Take care of yourself, and we will catch you next time. Do not mess with Texas. Okay. Thanks. See ya.